Hello, everybody. Welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around fantasy Premier League. My name's Suj.
And my name is James.
Back to the usual drill, James. Review the teams, review the games, answer a few questions. Normal life has been resumed for a Monday.
Let's not lie about it. It wasn't that exciting, was it?
No, it wasn't. To be honest with you, it wasn't. I think I didn't really pay attention to my FPL team until Chelsea City yesterday, where I actually looked in and thought, okay, what's happened? Don't get me wrong. I knew what had happened to my players as the kind of 2 days had gone on, but I never looked at it as an overall to kind of look back and think, am I happy? Am I unhappy? What would I have done differently? What would I have done differently? I kind of sat back because Haaland, for me, was the game changer of the weekend. Like, if Haaland had gone off, it would have been very different if Haaland hadn't. So there was obviously a lot of people in split camps around him. But until then, yeah, no, I would agree with you. It wasn't that exciting, James. It was, I mean, look at the average. The average is at 50.
Talking about football, Suj. The actual football itself.
If I said
to people, what was the game you enjoyed most this weekend? I think people would have to go, oh, yeah, none of them were bad, but none of them were great. I'm just saying from an entertainment perspective. I
didn't watch Friday night, so I can't comment on that. I watched the first half of Liverpool, which was pretty flat, and then I went off and had some lunch, and when I came back, it was 2-0 to Liverpool, so it was quite a different game. I flicked between Arsenal and Newcastle at 3 o'clock, but I think my stream was being a bit dodgy. As soon as Arsenal had scored and Newcastle had a player sent off, I kind of lost interest. I was like, okay, this is going to, you know how this is going to go now. And then obviously I watched West Ham Villa. And when I looked at the stats on West Ham Villa, I was like, there was no way there was 29 shots in that game.
Didn't feel like it, no.
29 shots. I was like, where? Where was those 29 shots? Because honestly, there were periods in that first half where I was like, is David Moyes in disguise? Is he like Lopetegui's secret assistant manager or something? Yeah, I would agree with you. It wasn't that exciting, to be honest with you. I'd say probably Chelsea City was the most enjoyable game of the weekend. Because as much as City were in control, Chelsea did have their moments. And whilst it was 1-0, there was always that jeopardy of where if Chelsea get a goal back, this could be quite different type situation. So I'd probably go with Chelsea City, but yeah, I would agree with you. It hasn't been riveting, let's say.
And do you want my big analysis of why that is?
Because a lot of players are still to come back?
No, because Tottenham are playing tonight. How was your FPL week?
Well, yeah, because Tottenham are playing tonight. Here's the interesting thing, though. I looked across Liverpool, Arsenal, Newcastle, and Manchester United. I think Arsenal had no new signings on the pitch. Liverpool had no new signings on the pitch. I'm going to check myself for a second there. Newcastle had no new signings on the pitch. And you've got to kind of think, hang on a second, we've had this transfer window where everyone's like talking crazy about buying players, yet all the teams look very much the same as they were last year. It's such a very familiar
I think it was less
weekend.
than, if you exclude the promoted teams, I think it was less than 20 actual debutants starting this weekend. A lot of debutants as substitutes, but yeah, you are quite right. It was quite a familiar feel to a lot of the teams. I think just the big takeaway from the weekend was the clean sheets, I think. So if you take the expected top 8, obviously Tottenham play tonight and won't keep the clean sheets. We never do. Chelsea played City, fair enough. Villa conceded a penalty to yourselves, Suj. The rest of the expected top 8 clean sheets. Newcastle, which we might argue a little bit fortuitous, maybe. But all clean sheets in there. So, I mean, that's more than we had in any game week last year.
For sure. I mean, when we get on to talking about your team, I mean, bench boost, one of the most difficult things in a bench boost is defensive points, I think, to try and get, because you may inevitably end up with a goal. Well, you obviously have one goalkeeper, but you may inevitably have 2 defenders on your bench in a bench boost if you're going to play 3 at the back. And so clean sheets are essential. And the closer we got on the Friday, when you were talking about your bench boost, the Liverpool, Arsenal, Newcastle, and probably the Spurs games felt as I'm annoyed with myself for not putting a bet on accumulator for them because they felt so likely that they were going to win and also win to nil. So it made sense, like when we're talking about your bench, I did can think about it as actually it's a really logical, sensible thing to do with the fixtures the way they are. But I hadn't spent any time thinking about it, right? You'd spent 2 weeks planning a bench boost. I was like, I'm not going to suddenly think, actually, those fixtures look good. Let me put together a bench boost team now. I mean, it would probably look very similar in terms of the structure to yours, and it all obviously came in. From an FPL weekend point of view, I would say, like, I'm fairly happy. I'm above average at the moment, but I've still got Solanke and Porro to go. I'm on 53 points. And it almost feels like a little bit, there's only one regret in there, really, and it's not even a regret. So I look at all my players returned: Gabriel, Hall, Saka, Jota, Haaland, Isak captain. The players that didn't return, Leno was 3 minutes plus added time away from a clean sheet. So that could have looked quite different had United not scored very late on. And also Leno was a player that obviously had a difficult week one, but now goes on a good run. So that's perfectly fine for me. Christopher Nkunku, question marks around what happens here. Then I was disappointed to see him go off before 60, though I didn't think he was awful. And obviously Chelsea go on a better run from game week 2 onwards. And Jacob Murphy was the unfortunate sacrifice for Fabian Schär's red card. So I can't really be upset about any of those. I didn't have high expectations from Leno, and he came pretty close. I didn't have high expectations from Nkunku against City, and Jacob Murphy was not his fault. It was a red card, so kind of skew-whiffed it that way. My bench, obviously Fabianski was just 4.0 for the Barco not turning up is a conversation that a lot of people have been having, and is what it is because he's inevitably third sub most weeks.
We'll have it.
Smith Rowe on the bench, his good run starts in game week 2, and Munoz popped up with an assist even though I left him third on the bench, so there's no real issues around that.
That was quite funny. I literally was watching that game and I was thinking, I'm watching this and I'm thinking, do you know what? On the eye here, I'm thinking Mitchell over Munoz. Literally, it was 30 seconds later. He's got the header on the back post for the assist and went, oh, okay, fine.
Well, do you know, yeah, I don't look at it and have any kind of real major regrets. To be honest, they're all been okay. But the thing is that the ownership across them so high, I'm not making any ground anywhere.
Would you finish on points wise?
At the moment, 53 with Porro and Solanke to go.
Okay. Happy or not?
I don't think it's too dissimilar to your 11, is it? What's your 11 got? And then you do have extra Spurs to go.
Well, technically, if you take away the 26 points on the bench boost, I would have 53 as well.
Yeah, but you got two extra players.
I'd have 4 to go tonight.
Yeah, so 2 versus 4. So you got Kulusevski, who's not going to play because Johnson's going to play on the right, and Son,
who's not going to play because what?
Nah. Richarlison, of course.
Yeah, sure, boss.
Richarlison. But yeah, so look, there's obviously going to be a little bit, but it's not a huge difference as it stands at the moment, depending on Leicester, which they're going to be rubbish. And look, the average is there or thereabouts where everybody's in and around that, right? I haven't seen too many disasters.
I've seen a few that aren't great, and I've seen some very, very good ones this week as well. I'm obviously pretty pleased with how it's gone with the returnees of the 4 on the bench. I'm a little bit reluctant because obviously I know if the game for whatever reason didn't happen tonight, then I've got no bench boost. So to sit here and kind of claim it feels a little bit wrong. That would obviously be
as it stands. Come on,
uncontrollable.
You got to enjoy it while you can.
I'd have at least 6 because my 2 goalkeepers both returned. So yeah, very pleased. I'm on 79 with the 4 Tottenham to go tonight. I loved a lot of the wasn't the kind of accusations of cheating, but how have you gamed the system with 4 Tottenham? I'm not sure if people quite realise the patience that it required from Sunday to Friday to not actually touch it and actually leave it as it was. I was maybe a little bit handicapped, but I was happy with my lot. And I had decided overnight Thursday, as I said on the final drafts pod on Friday, that I probably would stick with Kulusevski over Garnacho, even if I heard he was playing. Then there was a team that went round about 2-3 o'clock, which a lot of people picked up on, that had Garnacho in the United team. And I'd still come to the conclusion I was going to stick with Kulusevski. Then there was the wild bits in the lead up to the deadline. He was kind of like the headline of, oh shit, maybe he's not in the Manchester United team actually. Yeah, obviously the 4 Tottenham to go tonight. From the 3 Liverpool, 22 from Trent, Jota, and Van Dijk. 26 from the 3 Arsenal of Raya, Saliba, Havertz. Newcastle return is a little bit disappointing. Obviously, Isak captaincy, Hall 5, Murphy 1 for the 16 there. We know there was some mitigating with that, although Southampton started very well, as we'll discuss. And then Onana 6 on Friday night. And Mbumu yesterday. It's not often I cheer a goal in FPL, and I did yesterday when that went in, Suj, because that was the real 1 week punt in what I'd went for was Brian Mbumo. So for him to score yesterday, I was pretty pleased with the 9-pointer from him. So yeah, on 79 tonight, I did say to you Friday, if I hit 102 again, I'd be really delighted. It's not impossible if it's a good night for Tottenham tonight.
Indeed.
But I've seen a few people saying, oh, James can end the game week as like #1 in the world, possibly if it goes well tonight. I'm 44 points off of first. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Even with a bench boost. So when, to give that a little bit of perspective, like how good is it? The bench boost is fine and it's worked okay. But I don't even think last year I was 17 or 19 off it and I was quite content. Obviously, if the Tottenham players play tonight, it's 26. That's really good because I'd be well happy with that in a double game week, I think, even if I had players playing twice. But I don't think I'll be able to call it a success till this week has gone because I don't think I'm wildcarding Suj.
Yeah, this is it, right? I think anybody that's celebrating or down in the dumps, just kind of, take it easy. The guy that's won in the world right now that you mentioned, that's the best part of 43 points ahead of you, is also on bench boost.
Also, Captain Salah. It's a massive difference.
His bench boost is worth 14 at the moment, so almost half what your bench boost is. But he captained Salah, and it was the Havertz, Saka, Jota, kind of these guys all getting into double digits that's really helped him. And he obviously had Boma as well as you, but had Nick Pope in goal, which
9-pointer, wasn't it? I think.
Good. Yeah, it did really well. So, yeah, I mean, for everybody that's done better than you, there's people that have done worse than you. It's game week 1. It's like the league table. What does it matter in game week 1 when I'm fairly sure that as it stands right now, I'm pretty sure that City are going to put a bid in for Eze, offered Doku as part of the swap deal because Haaland's going to punch Doku in the face in training today at least 20 times. And I'll triple captain Erling Haaland because if Eze was in Doku's shoes yesterday, I think I would have beaten you in score because Haaland could have done so much better. But we'll get to that game. Let's start the other side of Manchester first.
Just on Eze, I don't think that's happening now, Suj.
Yeah,
there was a large rumor that went around Friday night that the supposed contract clause had expired.
Okay. But then Doku turned up.
No, but I'm saying in terms of Eze leaving Palace, I think now it's swung. That information came out just after deadline, which would have been really useful to have it prior to deadline. I would think that Eze now will end this window as a Crystal Palace player, actually. I think that's a change because Palace don't have to talk and they've got enough going on with Elise's left. Obviously, Newcastle trying to get Gay. I think there's probably an acceptance that Gay maybe will go. But Palace don't need to talk to anyone about Eze. And Eze's interview after the game yesterday was really good about, obviously, the decision and stuff, and we'll talk about it. I didn't sound like a player that is on his way out the football club. I think Eze will be staying at Palace now. Yeah, just to clarify before we talk the game, Suj, obviously the plan for me was to wildcard. And I now don't think I'm going to do so. There is a little bit dependent on in terms of what the Tottenham players do tonight. But if I come out tonight and I'm really happy with them for Tottenham, particularly if, say, Kulusevski does start, which I know is a gamble, and then I'm happy with the 3 Liverpool as well, just them 7 going into Everton at home that looks a bit ropey at the weekend, and Brentford at home that I know is not great defensively, it does feel like I should wait 1 more week. Now, of course, what does it mean? It means no Haaland. It also means no Salah for me as well. But the team, I think, would just be, there wouldn't be enough justification to actually hit the wild card based on the fixtures that the Liverpool and the Tottenham players have got this weekend. I do have alternatives that I can use for captaincy, such as, to be honest, at the moment, it's bust on Jota. For me at the moment, it might be a Tottenham player after tonight as well. I still got Isak at Bournemouth. Like, it's fine. And then it's more difficult in three, where Tottenham go to Newcastle and obviously Liverpool go to Manchester United as well. And I've got a little bit more information on the likes of Chelsea if I wait the extra week. And obviously that's the start of Villa's swing, which isn't really now, because obviously they've got Arsenal this coming game week. So I'm not taking a -8 for Haaland. I spoke about this pre-deadline. If you didn't go with him, you was probably going to land in that situation. It's the same basically for me, even with Salah. Not quite to that extent. I could go Son to Salah and then obviously downgrade Jota to like a 4.5 or something. It could be done for a -4. I don't think so. And obviously anything I do transfer-wise has got to take a Tottenham player out, right? Because I'm sitting there with the 4. So it might be a case if I'm happy with the 4 Tottenham tonight, I think I'll just run with Tuesday. And then everything that I've earned this week, if Haaland goes batshit on Saturday, is in the bin. So I'm not claiming this as a win yet.
Yeah, it's just like a spectre that hangs over your shoulder is Erling Haaland.
It's just not justifiable for a -8 if it's one game. It's not for me. If people are looking longer term, I get it a little bit more, but I haven't got enough wrong with the team to be justifying doing that. That might be the case after tonight, but then I just think if I'm really that unhappy with the Tottenham players after tonight, then I'll activate the wild card.
Yeah, this is what it's there for. I think realistically, you always want to make 4 or 5 changes as a minimum on a wild card, and ideally more. If you're not going to make that many changes, or you don't see the upside in points in those changes, wait a week. It's just as easy that Jota goes off instead of Salah this week.
Well,
Everton were awful at the weekend.
If I wildcard, I'll possibly take out all of the Tottenham.
Before Everton at home.
Possibly, yeah.
We need to talk about that. Let's talk about Manchester United. Obviously, Garnacho not being in the team was a surprise for some because he'd been talked about as being really first choice. But I don't think any players that didn't play this weekend you can say necessarily were dropped. It might just be coming back to fitness a little bit later. And obviously, Matsurawi did start the game, though, despite him joining a little bit later. I think fair win for Manchester United, clean sheet at home, and we move.
Interesting game. I don't know whether to say it was deserved or not. I guess
XG will tell you it is.
I was just going to say it depends what the statistical line on this is, because I guess you were probably on for top bonus with Leno, was you at 0-0? Do you know? I imagine you probably would have been if it had finished 0-0. Because he did make big important saves. The XG is also massively skewed by the ridiculous moment in the last minute of the game where was it Diop or Bassi? One of them took a complete air shot, missed it. Rashford goes through 1-on-1 and plays a terrible pass to Garnacho. It's not the right way. Garnacho should still score, drags the shot wide. Just a car crash from all 3 players in that moment. That massively affected the XG. United clearly would have been ahead on that during the course of the game as well. And yet, I didn't play well, Suj. No. But there's 2 sides to this. One, I think there was a real period in the second half where I'm sure a lot of people would have thought this is really reminding me of the Wolves game last year. That opening game last year where Wolves played ever so well at Old Trafford on the Monday last season, because Fulham had them in real trouble. I mean, Andreas Pereira should put Iwobi through for 1-on-1, and how he manages to pass the ball straight to Harry Maguire is one of the worst passes, executions of a through ball you'll see all season. And at that point, Fulham possibly go 1-0 up and maybe win the game from there. And that sort of thing doesn't show up on an XG either, right? Because if Iwobi's running through 1-on-1, you've got a massive XG there, and it's just a poor pass from Pereira. That said, statistically, it was much better for Manchester United than that game against Wolves last year. Was it under 10 shots Fulham had? And we've obviously long taken the piss about the amount of shots that opponents have against Manchester United. So they were stronger defensively. But I think most of us watched the game and still felt there was elements of vulnerability particularly in that period, sort of midway through the second half, I think a lot of us were building to think Fulham might win this. But it's also first game of the season, and it's not that important. It's almost like the result is more important here. Get yourselves on the board. Particularly others have obviously followed at the weekend at the top end of the table and won their games. So I think you could kind of glass half full with Manchester United. I wouldn't go with. I can see the comparison to the Wolves game last year, but I also think there's improvements based on this year versus last year. But yeah, I think underlying issues still sit there for me. That with Fernandes and Mount as arguably the two forwards doesn't particularly work for me. I think United will certainly benefit once they have Haaland back. That's not likely to be after the international break. The earliest, probably sort of around about game week 6 when they play my team. I thought Matsuri did really well. A note on him as well. If you look at the price rise sites at the moment, he's the closest to a rise, I think, Matsuri. And I know people have potentially got Quansah issues that they want to fix. Just take a moment and look that Manchester United are playing Brighton away and Liverpool at home in their next 2. It's also, I've seen some speculation that his price might be locked, so he might not even go up in price anyway. I can't confirm or deny that, but I have seen some people suggest that. As I said to you last week, I quite like the idea of Dalot at left whack. And I think it works nicely. The two fullbacks did want to move into midfield. But despite the fact they should have had overloads in there with Fernandes and Mount dropping deeper and the fullbacks moving inside, it still felt like there was periods of the game that were getting dominated in that area. And if that's happening against Fulham, with respect, it's going to happen against some better teams as well. For Fulham, as you'd said, this good run really starts now. I think there'll be people that want to look at Muniz up front at 6 million. Those are on, should certainly keep the faith. He had a quiet evening. That's fine. Emil Smith-Rowe faded, and I don't think he's anywhere near 100% yet, but Leicester and Ipswich the next 2, there certainly could be returns there. Be interesting to see if Leicester fade late on tonight, maybe in the same way that Ipswich did, obviously, on Saturday. But is Smith-Rowe going to be around for that period of the game? Because it doesn't look like he's quite ready for 90 minutes as yet. So, but if I was wildcarding this way, I'd certainly be looking at Fulham. I think Robinson is the one to go to defensively if you want a defensive one. But I can't help thinking with him that it'll only be assists. And I think his final delivery still needs massive work. And I don't think he'll score many goals.
Yeah, I think, again, this is where the keeper for Fulham just ends up being a fair option at 5 million. Again, like you said, he was going to do well on the bonus. I do want returns out of him in the next couple of games. So hopefully Leno does right. I've got to start Smith-Rowe now that he's in my squad. If I'm not starting him against Leicester, then what was the point in owning him, I would say. So I'm going to start Smith-Rowe and hopefully be in the home fixture. He comes good in that tie. I'm not looking at adding anything Manchester United. I don't own any, and as it stands right now, I don't want any either.
No, I think you would have started with, for this kind of week, Bruno Fernandes, one of the unluckiest players at the weekend, really should have got a goal scorer in return. So those who are on Bruno have been particularly unlucky. I would say, the one thing I would say about I don't like him and playing essentially really far forward with another player of that ilk, like Mount, rather than a natural 9, he will go beyond more, as he did here, and therefore perhaps more likely to get chances. But United did look a little bit better, obviously, once Zerkey came on, which is a really weird goal because I think Fulham get done over because they overcommit to one side of the pitch, which is actually they're attacking towards Bruno Fernandes, and he waits enough. But what's really bizarre about it is that the finish is bizarre. United have then got a massive switch of play and they don't attack the situation quick. They're actually too ponderous. And it leads to Garnacho, who puts a cross in, which is nothing much to speak of. And it was a weird goal that you wasn't sure how it went in at first because Zerkey almost ends up prodding his foot at it and making a really nice contact basically off the sole of his foot, actually, which I think catches Leno by surprise because there's another United player behind who I think Leno thinks he's going to get to it. And that's why he reacts very late to it. So a strange goal to end, I want to say a strange game with pros and cons from Manchester United. Let me put it this way. My team's likely to be in competition with them this year, and I didn't see anything there to make me particularly worry.
Yep, true. Let's talk about some of the Saturday games. Ipswich 0, Liverpool 2. When I switched this on, I was kind of, my first question, and I think it would have been for a lot of people, is what are we going to see from Liverpool? Because obviously, with the new manager, and are we going to see the same 100 miles an hour rock and roll football of Klopp? Or are we going to see something completely different? Is he trying to implement a different philosophy on them? And the first half, I wouldn't say I was worried, but I was like, okay, this is not Liverpool I recognise, because they were pretty passive, and I was like, this is more like a slow build up. And then looking at the stats, which I've only looked at this morning, like to have an XG of 0.9 in the first half, but 2 point something in the second half. Obviously, then I had a bit of a break, came back to it, and it was 2-0. And at that point, it was chance after chance, and Salah could have easily had a hat trick. He had a couple of other opportunities where you're like, okay, if he's in form, like maybe had a run of games and was really match sharp, he could have put a couple of other chances away, and Liverpool could have, should have ended up with a couple more goals. Having said that, Ipswich also had a few chances where this is the problem for teams when you come up against a big team like Liverpool as a striker or a forward player. When you get in that position, it's like, I don't know if I'm going to get another chance again, so I've really got to make the most of what I've got here now. And it felt like a lot of their chances was panicky for Ipswich, where it's like, shit, I better do something, I better take a shot, and the end execution just wasn't really good enough. But they did get themselves in some all right positions, Ipswich, just final execution wasn't there with the shooting. But Liverpool will be happy after the first half to come away, obviously, with a 2-0 win.
Yeah, I feel like both teams can leave this quite happy. I think Liverpool needed to have that sort of strong second half for that to be the case. Ipswich were outstanding in that first half, Suj. Were very brave as a key word to use. They went man to man all over the pitch, and Liverpool found it really, really difficult to play through them. Essentially, their only out quite a lot was ball to Mo Salah over the top into that channel. They couldn't play through Ipswich at all in that first half, and you did get a sense of a build that Liverpool were maybe in trouble. That said, I also felt the closer it got to halftime, the more I felt like for Ipswich to have a chance of winning the game, they'd had to score, because the intensity that they were putting in, I think it was obvious to come to a conclusion and go, are they going to be able to sustain this? Probably not. They need to score and then go, okay, that's enough. Now we'll sit off and say, can you break us down? And obviously they didn't. And I think they came out with similar intentions in the second half. But the jump up in fitness and quality is just massive. It really is. And Liverpool went from looking really subpar in the first half to the sort of team in the second half that you went, oh, they could still very much challenge for this league title.
Yep.
I think a lot of that came down to fatigue. And also, I think even when the first goal did eventually cut, it felt like it was building from really early in the second half. Slot made this change at halftime, which is very relevant for obviously FPL purposes, because I know a number of people gambled on Jarell Quansah. Slot confirmed that the change to bring on Ibrahim Konate was tactical. Konate was warming up through large periods at the end of the first half. And obviously, as someone who had Virgil van Dijk sitting on their bench boost, was watching his movement quite a lot, and he seemed fairly comfortable. So it felt to me like it probably would be a tactical movement. He described the problem as being that they were really struggling in terms of duels. They were really struggling if they played it into the lap, who was pinning back against Quansah. I don't think Quansah did bad, by the way. I think he looked at it and went, I want more physicality in this moment. One of the reasons that Quansah was picked, and a lot of Liverpool fans were saying that he'd be picked over Konate, was because his calmness and distribution on the ball is actually better. Ironically, Konate plays a really nice pass into Gravenberch, which leads to the first goal. But I would caution, because now going into this second game, I think it's probably fair to assume Ivan Toney, who would have given that duel problem in the game at the weekend, presumably won't play for Brentford, as we'll talk about in a bit. And therefore, Quansah might still play this coming Sunday. He looked really gutted. Did you see the image of him on the bench, Suj?
No.
Quansah, he looked really, really gutted. And it might be one with the best thing to do. Because again, I don't think he was particularly bad. Put him back in. It might be. So just calm before people feel like they've got to move that. I think the fixture's good enough this weekend. You should, in most cases, you should probably try and hold it. Plus, he's also, as a centre-back, he'll either play or he probably won't. I realise Slot has made a tactical centre-back change here, But I don't suppose that's something that we'll see too often of him just ripping up his centre backs midway through a game. So I think there's every chance Quansah still plays this weekend. The first goal was delicious, right? And it was building for Trent, particularly, who played that pass to Mo Salah, who then finds Jota for the goal. He'd ended up playing this brilliant 1-2 with Szoboszlai and carrying through, and then got in the end of a cross, laying it down for Luis Diaz. Then moments later, I mean, probably biggest moment of my weekend, laughing at Garnacho Friday night and his miss. Jota's headed miss from Trent's cross. How many bloody points would that have been worth for me? Quite a number. And Jota's good in the air. He normally always scores them.
At half time, I was a little concerned about Jota in that, because Gakpo's on the bench and what have you. I'm like, come on, do something, because if he doesn't do anything, Gakpo comes on, does do something, I would have a lot of doubts about Jota going into this weekend. I'd be like, okay, has he done enough, or is he going to mix it up and lose his place? So I was glad that he actually scored and then was involved in and around the goals afterwards, because goal mouth action, let's say, because I was worried that at some point at half time that Jota might have become an FPL headache for me. Now going into next week, I'm pretty sure he starts.
I think Jota is always one that if you own Suj, you're going to be constantly monitoring. As I said, at the moment, I've got the captaincy bust on him for this week. I just think playing in the middle of that attack, my only concern with him is the minutes. And it's interesting that Darwin Núñez got none, Suj.
Yeah.
Wasn't brought on. I thought that was really interesting. It does make me a little concerned that Liverpool might buy a forward between now and the closing of the window if they feel like they can move that on potentially. But yeah, I'd be pretty secure with Jota, I feel, going into this weekend. And next to no doubt that he would start, actually. And he really could have hauled here. He certainly could have matched what Mo Salah's total was. As I said, that header, he normally puts away with his eyes closed. But it's also worth remembering the chance that he then scores a minute later would never happen if he scores the header. So he probably doesn't score twice. He probably still only scores once. Diaz also got really good minutes. I would expect that front three to remain the same. Second half, they got much better in the middle of the pitch. And the Liverpool fans were quite happy with how Gravenberch played. And I thought it was really good the longer the game went on. I'd have concerns about that, actually, though, against a better opponent in terms of getting pulled out of position potentially. But yeah, really good second half for Liverpool, which I think masked over a really challenging first half. But yeah, the second half, they showed what they could be. Couple of key points on Ipswich. Obviously, Ben Johnson didn't play, which was a real shock. Whether it had been at right back or right wing back, which he essentially played later in the game. It was very much what Paul FPL Tractor had said on Correspondent Week, like expect a back four on the ball primarily, but then off it at times it'll end up looking like a back five. It didn't so much. It did later in the game, the more they got pinned in. And with Wes Burns getting injured later in the game, it might be that Johnson will come in and potentially play right-sided midfield / right wing back. So although he's not played this week, he might get in. The big key takeaway, I think, for Ipswich is me looking at the no Haaland going into this weekend and looking at two things. One, how well Ipswich aggressively implemented their man-to-man system off the ball in the first half, which really gave Liverpool problems. But then also understanding how they opened up massively in the second half and Liverpool just picked them off, basically. And there's no doubt that City could do that. There's two sides to this, and you can spin your narrative however you like here. One, if they try and do that again against City, they probably will get smashed because City will control at a slower tempo that will manipulate and mean they get out of Ipswich's press far better than Liverpool did in the first half.
Yeah, I would say that City are just better at moving the ball around and players around to break through the lines, yeah.
But I also don't think Ipswich will do that. I think Ipswich will sit off. I think they probably will play a back five, and I think they will seize control a lot. I think McKenna genuinely identified that was the best way to try and beat Liverpool. And based on the first half, I don't think you could say that he was wrong. Because if Ipswich had gone in at half-time in front, I don't think there could have been too many complaints. Jacob Greaves stood out as someone who's likely to be a real aerial threat from set plays. And I think it's certainly obviously going to get the minutes. I was really spooked by the fact he didn't play their last friendly. I thought it was strange. He's possibly the 4.0 I'll end up carrying. I think once a wild card, maybe he's going to get the minutes. He's a little bit of a threat from set plays. Feels like an ideal third sub. But thinking about him more, I also thought about him and Haaland at the weekend. Because there are certain games where Haaland has struggled when he's had someone right in his back constantly who's a big physical player. Think Saliba. Many people remember the Craig Dawson example from a game where Wolves beat Manchester City last season. And I'm not suggesting here at all. I'm just filling my own narrative here of, what positives can I take of not having Haaland this week? Well, one might be that they defend deeper, don't go and press, and inside the penalty area, Greaves will potentially have a sole 1v1 duel with Haaland. Now, he obviously hasn't got huge experience at the top level, so he could well lose him. But it's also
that's a narrative to.
I'm just saying
Haaland.
It's the sort of one where we have seen games like that pass Haaland by a little bit. Do I think he'll go off on Saturday? Yeah. Would I captain him without doubt this Saturday? Yeah. If you said to me now, Haaland scores twice on Saturday as a non-owner, I take that.
Yeah, genuinely. I can't see beyond it. I think he's going to do well. And again, a lot of this stuff is dictated by game state. Like if City score early, it kind of changes everything. Let's see. We'll talk about City when we get to them. Arsenal 2, Wolves 0. In the end, a routine home win. I didn't think Wolves were particularly. They had one or two chances. The one where Juan crossed it in and Raya made a good save. But other than that, Arsenal were pretty in control. Bukayo Saka coming up trumps with the cross for the goal and also scoring himself. And it was actually really nice to see him go off at 80 minutes and be preserved for a little while, because we talk about him getting flogged. There was a period just before. I'm not a big Bukayo Saka owner in my FPL career, and so I don't got this understanding that when he goes down holding something, he's just moaning like he moans. There was a period before half time where he went down holding his I think it was his knee or his ankle, and I was like, oh come on, survive. And he just does his hobbly thing that he does, and the next thing you know, he's playing fine. So I need to get emotionally used to this Bukayo Saka hobbly bobbly thing that he does. But it was nice to see him come off 80 minutes, because I know he's all right to carry him into next week. And he was lively, to be fair. But Arsenal, routine home win is what you'd expect from them.
Yeah, I would score about right. I watched all this game back on Saturday night because, much to my dismay, this was the game being replayed on Sky rather than Brighton at Everton, as I was hoping it would be. But yeah, I did watch it. A couple of little concerns for Arsenal, talk about in a sec. But I think just quickly on Wolves, obviously really tough run of fixtures and no people not looking hugely at their assets at the moment. There's a few definitely to keep an eye on. Yerson Mosquera's got a little bit of the Christian Romero about him in the sense that he might just lose his head. I actually think he should have been sent off for the moment where he puts his hand on Havertz's throat. I think he knows exactly what he's doing. I think that should be a red card, personally.
I agree.
But I think what has become clearer over this week build up towards the game and even afterwards, and listening to Wolves fans react on it, he's now not just a regular starter for them. He's, as it stands, he's their first choice centre-back, Suj. So that's a 4 million. Again, fixtures are awful to start with. But actually, if they had a good run of fixtures, we'd be going, that's probably the one to go and get. And let's remember that they do from a roundabouts game week 10. So I think keep an eye on him. Aït-Nouri is obviously well documented in terms of the potential capability. I like them in midfield with João Gomez and Lamina. I think that's a really good pairing. We spoke in pre-season on Correspondent Week with Bradley Parker about expecting them to be a little bit more offensive. But would they go to Arsenal and go with like a back five? No, it was still a back four. And they've obviously got Matthias Cunha to come back into this. It was only a substitute at the weekend that will certainly improve it. Was interested in David Raya made one really good save from Larsson in the first half. And I liked his movement for that. It was really good. And he's a big lad, so he's going to get on the end of things inside the box. 5.5 forward. I'm not suggesting anybody goes there now, but that's probably one we weren't looking at pre-season. I think should be getting watched quite closely over the next number of weeks because he, with all the other attackers being in at 6.5, if you do want a way into their fixtures when it swings, it might be that you deem he's going to be the one. And we do think Cunha will probably play off him rather than in place of him. So it's more likely Bellegarde will come out the team. For Arsenal, what you'd expect, but Raya did have to make a couple of saves. That save from Larson, arguably maybe even save of the weekend. Some real sloppy moments playing out from the back. A lot of the problems that not they had a lot of problems, but some of the problems they had came from their own making a little bit, just a little bit sloppier than what you'd normally expect with them. I think on a different day, Wolves could have scored. And we have seen a number of these games over the last couple of years where Arsenal do win like 2-1 at home. Because I don't know if there's a concentration issue where they're more concentrated away from home. We spoke about this a lot with Adam Pritchard in the past. Why do you keep conceding goals at home and keeping clean sheets away from home? Like, I know they go to Villa at the weekend and concentration against opponents like Watkins and Bailey is going to be way higher. On that, I wouldn't be that surprised if Zinchenko comes out the team for the game at the weekend. They might chance Calafiore just because of Bailey.
Well, Timber came on
But it could even be that. I wouldn't be surprised,
so he was the sub that came on. So it might be that Timber gets the minutes, potentially.
If you'd have told me that Gabriel Martinelli was going to play 90 minutes against Matt Doherty, he 100% would have gone in on that bench boost for me.
Yeah.
Apparently, the Doc played quite well. And Martinelli, again, didn't have a huge impact on the game. Didn't look like someone you think, he's definitely going to nail down this place ahead of Trossard. There wasn't anything there that made me think that. So I think they'll continue to interchange. Odegaard had a quiet game, I think, from a fantasy output perspective. Saka and Havertz, really good returns. I mean, Havertz has obviously covered off me not having Saka, basically, this weekend, with obviously his own 12-pointer. So Havertz, I think for those who owns, a difficult sell, actually. But you might get to 3 and think, that Watkins run, but home to Brighton won't be bad either. I think Havertz and Saka are clearly the two attacking ones. And I do still think you're going to want something defensive from it.
Agreed. Let's talk about Everton 0, Brighton 3. You have got to be disappointed if you're an Everton fan. But I did speak to a friend of mine yesterday who was an Everton fan, and he said, look, he goes, me and every Everton fan will tell you, if we see a team sheet with Michael Keane in it, we know what's going to happen. And when you look at their back four, I mean, Ashley Young, Michael Keane, and as much as Mikalenko has been lauded as potentially the best 4.5 in the game, it doesn't fill you with confidence. And Brighton have some attacking talent in there, don't they, with Minte and Mitoma and Pedro and Welbeck, and they took them to pieces in the end.
Absolutely. Just before I forget, on Minte, obviously that was confirmed as a concussion substitute. And the laws did change last season where really you shouldn't play for 12 days unless it's under exceptional circumstances. So keep an eye on the news this week, but I would say it's unlikely that he plays against Manchester United at the weekend based on that. He clearly was frustrated. It was quite clear when he came off, but that might be in terms of his own unhappiness with the fact that he might even know that something's not right. Great assist from Mitoma, clearly one to watch. I'm not saying those that own should sell, by the way. The news going into that weekend would be really, really important. Come back onto Brighton, though, because I want to talk Everton. I want to talk Everton because of what I said to you near the start, Suj. And we're going to wildcard and take out these Tottenham players before that. Because Michael Keane, as it stands, probably will play again. And you'd mentioned, obviously, Ashley Young. Well, Ashley Young won't play because he's suspended, having got sent off. Nathan Patterson's injured. Seamus Coleman is injured. Do they play Mason Holgate at right back?
Yeah, this is exactly what my mate Martin said yesterday. He was like, when you see names like Mason Holgate still floating around, he doesn't think Sean Dyche fancies Patterson anyway, even if he was fit, which he never is. Yeah, I wouldn't be selling any Spurs before this weekend, James.
Yeah, let's see what happens tonight. But yeah, this is kind of what's in my thinking at the moment. Yes, you might even, it could well be, if Tottenham do well tonight, I can actually see, despite the fact Tottenham having really difficult fixtures in game week 3 and 4, and actually kind of being the start of a really bad run, might even be some interest for Tottenham players, because you might get people get fear of like no Solanke this week. If people have gone, ironically, definitely see this. Watkins owners going Solanke this weekend. By the way, not advisable, because look at Ollie Watkins' swing of fixtures in game week 3. Just suck it up and stick if you've made that decision. So yeah, Everton concerning. And yet they played all right in the first half. Ignore the McNeil weird moment because he's offside anyway. The penalty on a different day definitely could stand. You know, I thought the bar here was we're not going to massively overturn these things. Do I like it as a penalty? No, not really. But having given it, a little bit like with the Soucek one, they definitely could have stuck with it and gone, okay, there's contact, stay with it. So on a different day, Everton, it might have gone better for Everton. Obviously, everything underlying, etc., looks way worse after the red card, etc.
Yeah, if you were to go on SofaScore and look at the kind of the graphy thing that they do, it shows it post red card. It's just pure Brighton.
Yeah, so Everton, as Sean Norton warned us, expect Everton to start slowly. That's what he'd said, and I can't get that out of my head thinking about Tottenham at the weekend. And it's Tottenham and Villa away now in 2 of the next 3 for Everton. Suddenly that looks rougher, doesn't it? Considering the circumstance. Possibly put quite a bit of pressure maybe on their game against Bournemouth in game week 3. If you've gone Pickford or Mikalenko, I think like that's not like an abort. It's longer term decision making, isn't it? I would think
Pickford,
in many cases.
Mikalenko, because you can bench. I wouldn't. I'd be surprised.
Yeah, you
if
were
it's your
probably
biggest,
planning to do that anyway.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he was your biggest problem. Do I think Everton might just go all out defence against Spurs and dig in and just make it an absolute dog of a game for you? Yes.
Could
they grind out a 0-0?
Yeah.
If I heard it was 0-0 at the weekend against you, I wouldn't be so surprised. I'd be like, Everton have done a Sean Dyche special there. So Pickford I would still hold. Mikalenko I would bench.
I wouldn't fancy them if Holgate and Keane are in the back 4. There's any you go. I don't need to say anything else, do I?
No. I'm again. You're talking about narratives. I'm like, even if they dig in, I don't know if they have the personnel to be able to do a low block style defense because you've got talented enough attackers to pick it apart.
As I said, like at the moment, if I'm going against Haaland, as long as I'm positive on them for Tottenham after tonight, I don't see me wildcarding. I see me sticking with them going into this week. And it might be that armband moves from Jota and gets put on Solanke or Son. Very, very conceivable. Just another quick note on Everton in terms of FPL, which will be relevant for a few. Timo Robenham apparently played really well. And if that's your 4.5 million midfielder of choice, you're obviously not going to start him, but you're probably okay for good minutes. I think 9 tackles, 1 at the weekend. Such good jump player. Evertonians liked what they saw from him at the weekend. For Brighton, I did say this, I think on my deadline stream, was like, oh, because of Minter, everyone's completely overlooked Mitoma, who I was absolutely adamant was almost one of the first picks for me at 6.5 last year, but was under no consideration at the same price this year, primarily because of the fixtures. I'll tell you what, if he has a good 2 and 3, people will be really tempted by them games in 4 and 5, though.
I think I might play the fixtures and just get a Brighton attacker for 4 and 5. Ipswich at home and Forest at home. You really can't ignore that.
João Pedro really unlucky not to return. Obviously hit the post. Perhaps could have had a penalty himself, but I don't think so. And obviously brilliant price at 5.5. The only thing I did think with it, and I think we've seen a little bit of this at the weekend with the BPS, is if you've got forwards, it really does feel like they've got to be scoring regularly. And if they do, they're going to get bits of BPS go with them. And I don't know if he's going to hit the big numbers. You don't expect him to at 5.5, but you just look at Solanke, Watkins, Isak, Havertz, and feel like they are more capable of that. And therefore, it might be better off putting more of your budget in that area of the pitch than it would have done in previous years. Because it just feels like the BPS will come with their goals this year. It's one weekend's worth of data. It could change, obviously. That's the only... him at 5.5 is not a problem. There's just a small negative on it. On Barco, when I saw that he wasn't playing, I thought, oh, I know what he's done here. Hurts. Like, he's got nice Everton. They'll try and play diagonals onto him. So he's probably put someone like Webster at left back to deal with that. Right. Jack Hinchwood is not that answer to what that was. So as far as I'm aware, Jack Hinchwood didn't play left back at all in pre-season for Brighton. If that's the case, then apologies. But it felt like a move out of absolute nowhere that no one could have foreseen happening. And whether Barco gets back in now at left back has obviously got to be questionable. Again, I'd recommend that people probably just sit on their hands and just leave that being for the minute. There's a strong possibility you weren't going to play him in game weeks 2 and 3 anyway. Just wait. The situation might develop where you're coming into 4 and 5 and it looks like he's back in that team. But yeah, it's certainly questionable now. Jason Steele was in the bonuses despite making just the one save. 55 passes completed, which you'll know from your previous knowledge playing Sky Fantasy Football is a huge number for a goalkeeper. That's part of the reason for that. I said this in one of the pre-season pods. I think Verbruggen is going to be a really interesting FPL asset when he's back later in the season, because you're probably going to be picking him up at cheaper because of this injury. And it might be that Steele stays in goal for the first sort of 10, 12 games or so. And Verbruggen might be worth looking at as and when Brighton's run comes round. The Barco injury means you're going to look at the others as well, and the security of something like Lewis Dunk as well.
Barco injury.
What could he have been?
Well, you said it. You used the word injury.
Did I?
You just said the Barco injury.
Oh, slip of the tongue.
Okay, the Barco dropping.
As far as I'm aware, he's not injured. As far,
okay,
I mean, he might have had a problem, but as far as I'm aware, no, Barco's not injured. Sorry if that came out of my mouth.
Nah, it's all good. It's all good. Let's talk about Newcastle 1, Southampton 0. It's hard to know how this game would have gone had Fabian Schär not been sent off. Like, Newcastle weren't cooking on gas at the point that he did get sent off. Like,
Not cooking on any gas, Suj.
No, there was still issues. Lewis Hall he looked ropey, if I'm honest with you. I was surprised to see Anthony Gordon start. He did look lively, let's say. He'd had a red ball or two before the game, but there wasn't any real attacking threat. And then as soon as the red card obviously happens, then you're like, all right, okay, just one of my attacking players, get me a return and let's go home. Give me a clean sheet for Lewis Hall. I'll take anything out of Murphy and Isak and let's go home. And in the end, just to get the assist of Isak is probably disappointing, but circumstance, take it.
He was actually in the BPS, Murphy, when he got taken off. You know that?
Oh, don't tell me.
I mean, look, obviously would have needed an attacking return to stay that way, but it started okay, I think. That's the only player that hasn't returned for me yet this week, and I think I can certainly look at that and go, okay, can't have foreseen that happening. But you can have no complaints on the red card. Yes, Ben Brereton Diaz absolutely milks the situation. Unfortunately, the way the rules are, that's absolutely what he should do. And Fabian Schär, as a very experienced centre-back, should know much better than get involved in something like that in a fixture where Newcastle are expected to dominate and win. But they were not such. On Talking Tactics for Advanced Tier patrons this week, I'll be watching this back to see what happened in the opening period of the game before the red card, because Southampton, from what I can tell, had control anyway. And that surprises, because I was really concerned about how they would deal with Newcastle's press. And you could say, oh, the goal, yes, that's the McCarthy problem. But largely they were dealing with it quite well and having control. And actually, I think it's a little alarming for Newcastle that happened. So I want to look back on that. It might mean that Russell Martin is very much going to stick to these principles, but they may be better than perhaps we'd anticipated with Southampton. They need a close watch. And I don't mind if people want to punt something like Diaz this week going into Forest at home. I really don't.
Well, he was high on your wildcard list of gets, wasn't he? So
yeah, I mean, if I'm waiting a week, less so, because I'm going to be after Nottingham Forest at home. So it maybe be a no for me, but then I can watch him in a fixture where there's an anticipation that he may get something. I think he would be a better asset than Armstrong if you were to invest in Southampton offensively. The guys who played at the back, I think the system might stick, in terms of the three at the back, which is what they played at the weekend. I don't think it's necessarily a given that they go back to a back four for Forest at home. I think this might be possibly how they're going to play. Which unfortunately is not going to be enough, I think, to make Walker Peters or Sugawara interesting at 4.5. there's still a good chance Walker Peters will leave. And still be massively put off for getting one of the 4.0 defenders, although Harwood Bellis would be the most secure because the goalkeeper has seen again at the weekend. Unfortunately, we warned it is going to be a real problem. The goal came basically exactly from what Matt Samuel, congratulations on the wedding at the weekend, mate, warned us would probably happen on correspondent week. And it's cost them the game because that's essentially the only decent effort on goal Newcastle have had in the whole game, which is brilliantly finished by Joel Linton as well. And I know Newcastle fans were hugely impressed with his performance at the weekend. I haven't watched that opening period yet, so it's interesting to hear what you say about Hall. But presumably he stays in the team with no concern going into this weekend, or they're changing two at the back four, right? Because Share's obviously suspended. And to go back to the Tottenham asset point, okay, game week 3 without him maybe against my team. Now, Newcastle might have bought Mark Gay by that point. And I know, by the way, Newcastle played with Emil Kraft against my team and demolished them last year. But Fabian Schär was still a part of that. And I think that's key for them. So I'd be a little bit concerned about Newcastle defensive over these next couple.
You do say changing two of the back three if they change Lewis Hall, but obviously Trips was on the bench.
Maybe even three of them.
Yeah. Exactly. So Trips coming back in for Livramento suddenly, with that in mind, though, they're going to Bournemouth away. Murphy's going to get benched for me anyway because I'd rather play Smith Rowe with the home fixture against Leicester. And I'll be playing Lewis Hall and I'll be playing Isak going into this week unless I hear otherwise.
At the moment, I've got Murphy and Hall bust on the bench. I'd pick Saliba over them.
Well,
despite the fixture. Does it? Villa away?
Yeah, it's a close one, actually.
I think it's close between Saliba and Murphy, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Nottingham Forest won. That Bournemouth team that we're just talking about won. Disappointed. I mean, was it this Danilo that went off with his leg, wasn't it?
Horrendous injury. Unfortunately, it's not as bad as you may have thought. There's every chance he may play sort of even as early as sort of Christmas time, January, maybe. So that's good news. Touch wood for him that he'll make a full recovery. It did look like a really, really bad one. It'd be disappointing for Forest not to win this game under the circumstance, having got their lead. Chris Wood returning for those who gambled on that. And I think those who did that were really specifically hoping for a return this week because it was Muniz's hardest game on paper if you were comparing the two. One really interesting note, obviously Willy Bolly played at centre-back and Milenkovic didn't. We think Milenkovic was suspended and no one knew. We think this is the hangover from a suspension he would have served if he'd have stayed with Fiorentina in Italy.
Right, okay.
And it just wasn't reported. FPL didn't have him flagged or anything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it seems like it's an oversight. Forest didn't come out and say like he's suspended. We think that was just a one-game ban. As far as I'm aware, there's probably some Forest fans can clear that up if anyone's interested. But there's every chance he'll come back in, certainly based on what Mark Southern said in pre-season, that he would be first choice. They are a little bit lighter in that midfield area now with obviously that Danilo injury as well. I expect them to invest in that area. But again, for those who gambled Ibrahim Sangare as the 4.5 million midfielder, I think that's probably even more clarity that it'll be first choice in that area. Those who watch Match of the Day will see he got highlighted a little bit as well. Disappointment for the attacking ones behind, though, in terms of returns. For Bournemouth, all change, presumably from next game. Evan Nilsson, obviously not involved, was signed. Big move for them from Porto. Will clearly become their number 9. So if people are looking, Semenyo played, OOP up front at the weekend. He may do again against Newcastle, subject to how ready Evan Nilsson is, but it won't stick. This lad's coming in and going to play up front.
Yeah, I don't know. I could use my insider Portuguese knowledge. The season here started a week before the Premier League did, so he would have been in pre-season a little bit earlier and be fitter. So you'd expect him to be fit and ready to come in. Yeah,
I mean, that signing was announced like Friday afternoon, Friday evening. It's possible that he wasn't even registered in time. We think maybe he was, but I think the club just made a decision. Might have even been language barrier, possibly a little bit as well as a new signing, just to, have a watch of the first game and be ready for the second. So he might go straight in for the second game. I think if you did gamble on your Forest players, I think you're probably sticking with it, aren't you? Presumably you did so with the first three.
Yeah,
All in mind.
there was a few fixtures, and when I had Hudson-Odoi, and it was for a few weeks, not for 1 week. So I think you still keep going with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Bournemouth is a wait and watch and get a little bit more information. Both goals in this game were a bit strange in the sense Neto should do better on Yates' shot from Wood scores. A little bit similar to Jackson's disallowed goal yesterday. And it was a bit pinball-y for Semenyo's equaliser as well, was also a strange goal. And not a disaster for either of these to take a point in their first one. Bournemouth have got some tough games coming up now. Newcastle, Chelsea, their next two at home. Liverpool away in 5. I think they're a watch and wait. Araujo, who came on as a sub, would almost definitely become right back as the season progresses and maybe one to keep an eye on.
West Ham 1, Aston Villa 2. I would describe this game as forgettable, really. It just...
But you lost, Suj.
Well, but just... also in terms of, I don't think there was a lot from a West Ham point of view that we could then take into the next weeks, because I think so many of the team, I could see at least 5 of the starting lineup changing by the next week. I'm just confused as to how the game had an XG of 4.5. There was a penalty in there, but 4.5, 29 shots, 8 big chances. That does not feel like the game.
What was your XG, Suj?
2.46.
Okay, so take off. Penalty. Yeah, so that'll leave you about 1.75. And Souček's miss, subject to what model you looked at, I saw XG Philosophy had it at 0.93.
Right.
Souček miss at the end, which was a crazy ending to the encounter. That leaves you on sort of like 0.8 once you take those two incidents out. Yeah. So context's important.
Of course. And I think context is the thing. Like my biggest disappointment from this game was conceding a goal so early, because it felt, you know how goals can change game state, and it's like, okay, 4 minutes in, now Villa being away can change the way they play because they've managed to get themselves ahead so quickly. And with such a simple, straightforward set piece goal where Onana versus Antonio, Antonio's physically strong, but he's just left him behind. Antonio hasn't tracked him at all, and he's
I don't think it mattered even if he did, because of what happens in front of it drags and opens the space.
That's
so
true.
He'd have to run on it.
There was a period. There was a corner in the second half where Duran, I don't know if you remember, pulled Antonio's shirt and he fell over, and they got the corner taken again. But I think you're right, because there's 2 players in front of him. It's difficult the way that they break, and Onana gets a free header. But then from a West Ham point of view, like, okay, we're playing catch up from minute 4. What's actually going to happen here? It was forgettable. Like I didn't look at it and I'm like, okay, am I going to take anything away? No, because Thomas Souček's not going to be in this team moving forward. Antonio's not going to be in this team moving forward. Soufal is not going to be in this team moving forward. Mavropanos is not going to be in this team moving forward. And it's arguable whether Guido Rodriguez will stay in the team moving forward. But also, I don't think you can stay there as a fan and say, well, we'll get all of these players back in and Todibo's going to do this and that. Because what if Todibo gets injured? What if Fulham gets injured? You can't rely on new players to change your team. You need your existing players to be able to fit with the new system as well. So difficult afternoon for West Ham, where it just felt like a false dawn and wasn't great. Villa were okay, I would say. They didn't set it alight either. But Leon Bailey looked dangerous without, I think, stretching himself. He almost played within himself a little bit. I'm always like, but Leon Bailey, if he goes at 90% or 100%, will injure himself. So you almost want him to play at 80% so he doesn't cause himself any issues. I think he's still under consideration for me from Villa. I still think Leon Bailey looks dangerous. People will have gone with Ollie Watkins. Bottom line is, he hadn't played a pre-season game. So you kind of look at it and
it showed.
He hadn't played a pre-season game. So again, it's like, what are we going to take from this into next week? Well, nothing, because Ollie Watkins will have had a week of fitness and be a lot fitter. I did think Morgan Rogers looked really good. I think his driving, running, I hadn't watched much of Morgan Rogers. You can tell there's a player in there that at 5 million, I can see why a lot of people would have gambled on him as well.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest FPL takeaway from this was Morgan Rogers and his positioning at 5.0. Like if he's going to play, effectively joins the first line of press with Ollie Watkins off the ball and obviously joins in from the 10 position with him on it. yeah, 5 million. Obviously, having lost Oscar Bob, there's a few that would have just gone that way.
Yeah.
And with the turn of fixtures coming, yeah, that's another one that needs another big watch and wait at the weekend. I do think that there's a possibility that he might move out of that position and go
But
back to
they just got too much
the
talent there,
left.
right? Jacob Ramsey came off the bench and is fit again. So yeah,
But
I don't know if he'll hold the position.
yeah, at 5 million, you can afford to maybe take the chance. I mean, yeah, I've mentioned Sangari and Iropenham. I'd much rather that people would set up with that 0.5 more in the bank for Rodgers. I've already looked at a potential of what I would maybe do if I do pull the trigger. He goes in for me, I think, as 5 million as the 8th attacker. And then there's a choice to be made on a game by game basis, which with the great run of fixtures they've got sort of between 3 and 9, there's every chance he'd get used a little bit. And that can also cover up for one or two that maybe have more difficult fixtures. So really like him as an option to keep an eye on. I like Bailey as an option at 6.5. I think after this forthcoming weekend, and obviously Watkins is going to be of interest as well. And if I go through this weekend without Haaland and Salah, Suj, there's a temptation once I wildcard after that to go, well, let's keep going. We'll just throw in the Watkins, the Isaks and the Sakas and the Palmers and give myself my coverage of captaincy choice between those sort of players. And I don't really want to be without Ollie Watkins that period 3 to 9 for that exact reason. It'll always give me a decent little out from a captaincy if I decide to do that. Luca Dean's still playing at left back. Interesting, because I think you see the benefit of Maatsen going forward later in the game. I can see why Lee Jackson was quite high on him as a prospect. It's a beautiful goal, by the way, the winning goal.
Second goal was great.
Yeah, it's probably my favourite goal of the weekend, actually. Not because it was scored against you, so it's just
I get it.
The free single all left foot touches was just
Yeah.
The last
I looked
two.
at it, you just like, when a goal like that is scored against you, you just have to
Nice
take it and say, yeah.
And it was written that Duran would score it, wasn't it?
Oh, so written. So written. So written. Football is all about stories. That's one, isn't it?
Yeah, West Ham, I think he's watching brief. There would be a little bit of concern for usage with the next two of Palace and Man City that you might walk into game week 4 and be on 0, but I wouldn't have major concerns about that. You mentioned players might come into the 10 foot. Somerville was really lively.
He did look lively.
When he came on.
I think it says something that Paqueta and Bowen were 2 of the 3 taken off at 73 minutes, which is fairly early. Obviously fitness, like Paqueta was at the Copa America, Bowen with the Euros. So maybe there's a little bit around getting them back to full fitness, and he thought, let me just take him off at 73. But it was 1-1 then, right? So
yeah, I think that it's perfectly understandable players like that. And look, Watkins came off about the hour mark as well from the same game. It's perfectly reasonable. You mentioned Saka coming off at 80. Even that, right? So a lot of these players were obviously on slightly restricted minutes this weekend. I wonder if that's going to impact Kudos negatively further down the line, purely because when that circumstance comes back around in 3 or 4 weeks, I don't think Bowen or Paquetá come off. So it feels easier that, we're going to bring Somerville on. Would Kudos go off by default at that sort of stage then?
But Kudus was the most lively at the start of the second half. He had Matty Cash on toast.
At the weekend, yeah.
So I think it depends on the game state. I just found the substitutions were almost, what do you have? Like James Ward-Prowse, Danny Ings coming in, just felt a little bit, that's not an upgrade on Bowen and Paqueta. I don't care how tired Bowen and Paqueta are. So, yeah. It is a watching brief at the moment.
Yeah, definitely on West Ham. Villa is also watch, I think, for this weekend, and then know that the really good run starts obviously in game week 3. Villa started really well, so first half out of great, and then they finished the better till the point that they scored. So obviously Souček should nick you a draw at the end, but they were marginally the better side. I thought they were really impacted by the penalty decision. I think I don't actually have too much of a problem that it stood.
It's contact.
He wins the ball, but then the next incident is then the tangle of legs. I really think that's one where I hope that's one where they show us the audio, because I think what you need to hear then at that point for VAR not to intervene is if they've spoke to the referee and the referee says, what I saw is, I think Cash may have got a touch on the ball, but I've given the decision for the tangle of legs afterwards, then you just go, okay, fine,
Okay.
that's what you've
Yeah.
seen. What should happen there is need clarity of asking a referee what he's saying, because if the referee goes, I've just given it for a foul by Cash on Soucek, VAR for me should be saying there at that point, do you think Cash got any of the ball, yes or no? And if he says, no, I don't think he got any of the ball, then I think they should be sending him to the monitor to then say, okay, you need, not we're telling you to overturn this, you need to see a different angle of this. That's what should happen.
Yeah. The most annoying VAR decision was not that, or the penalty for me was, there was a moment in the first half, and this is harping back to last season, against Newcastle, where Anthony Gordon won the penalty against us, where Kudus and I feel like it was Bailey were going for a ball off in our penalty box for Aston Villa, and Kudus kicked him. Like, they both swung for a ball, and Kudus kicked him. But it was 50-50, I would say, and it wasn't given as a penalty for Villa. So you can swing your leg to kick a ball when you don't have control of the ball, kick an opposition player, and it's not a penalty. Or you can swing your leg to kick a ball when you have control of the ball, kick an opposition player, and it is a penalty. I found that one bizarre, but yeah.
I'd just be careful at the moment for all things, just generally comparing anything decision-wise with last season, because there is certain implementations and things might be treated differently next year. I still think that Gordon incident last year probably would be given as a penalty this year. I'd just be a little bit cautious of doing that and going back.
Yeah, my question is, what's the difference between the two, though? You kick an opposition player.
Did Bailey make a meal of it in the way that Anthony Gordon did?
He definitely went down. But
maybe didn't do it well enough.
Yeah, we need better acting players.
I'll be honest, Suj, I can't remember the incident, so
yeah,
it never stood out to me.
No. Cool. Okay, let's talk about Brentford 2, Crystal Palace 1. Where is Ivan Toney?
Well, I was going to say, actually, let's do Toney first. There's a lot of talk, by the way, over the weekend, and many people have seen this on socials, of a reported story that Toney met Mikel Arteta in February. And Arteta left that meeting with clear clarity that he didn't want to buy Toney.
Okay.
Which is interesting. If that's true, and then that's funneled down to other clubs, you can understand where this narrative of, oh, they don't like him has come from, right? Because that is a narrative that's been going around, isn't it? So, oh, well, if he's not, if Arsenal don't like him, because it is basically sounded like it was a decision based on a clash of personalities rather than, oh, actually, no, I'm here, but actually, I don't think you fit my system. That's not the decision here, is it? They've met each other, and obviously for whatever reason they've not got on. It sounds like he's going to go to Saudi, mate.
Wow. Okay.
That's the word going round. I don't see him ending up at another Premier League club. The ones that might have been on the table, like my club, have obviously bought Solanke. Your club has bought Fulkrug. They're gone. Anything he joins in the Premier League at this stage.
Man United bought Xerxes.
That's the only one I could maybe still see. And obviously, you never rule Chelsea out from something mad. And look, if Isak got injured this weekend for Newcastle, could Newcastle maybe look at it, for example? Maybes, but I don't see him. So he's ended in a position now, a little bit like Zaha, I think, where this is what happened with Wilfried Zaha last year. It was like, well, at 1 year left of contract, who's coming for me? I'm ready. And the moment of interest from clubs like Arsenal, it was gone. That moment had passed. So he ends up staying. And I don't think it's beyond possibility that's what happens with Toney at Brentford this year as well, that he ends up staying. And yet still at the end of the contract, might not get the move he wants, right? Zaha, yes, went and played Champions League football at Galatasaray, but it sounds like he wants out of there, right? We've heard him linked with Leicester over the last week or two, and apparently that's off the table now. And I just wonder if Toney's moment might have gone from that perspective, where the top clubs that he would have hoped would have been interested are not. It's quite sad for him, because you know what I think of him as a player. Brentford have shown over the course of this last year, though, that they can cope without him. And that front three, of Bumo, Visser, and Sade has the potential to cause anyone danger on the counter attack because it's got everything in terms of its speed. I think Visser now has scored and assisted in his last 3 Premier League games, Suj.
Okay.
Because I think he did that in the last 2 last year, and has obviously done it in this game as well. Although a little bit fortuitous, maybe on the winning goal. It's not for me to question the capabilities of Dean Henderson because I've never done that before. Good result for Brentford. I think it was a pretty even game.
Yeah, I was going to say a lucky result for Brentford because Palace will be
Yeah,
disappointed they didn't get a draw out of it, especially with the incident with Eze as well.
yeah. But what I would say is I think Palace were probably the better side, but I would add to that I never thought Palace were going to score in the second half. And I probably wanted a bit more from them from that perspective. Probably didn't help that they replaced Mateta at halftime with Edouard. I think if they'd have wanted
Yeah, I
to
was
do that,
surprised to see him start, to be
well,
honest with
yeah,
you.
but I think if they were going to do that, they'd been better off doing it the other way and bringing just psychologically bringing Mateta into the game rather than taking him off. But it could well be that they thought Mateta could get through longer and maybe he couldn't, right? So yeah, I didn't really feel like they'd score, and I guess the own goal for the equaliser kind of sums that up a little bit. Eze owners are really unlucky. Not just because of the disallowed goal, but other moments in the game. He actually should play Mitchell in for one in the first half. We ends up having a shot blocked. The disallowed goal is mad unfortunate. Unfortunately, I tell you what happens in my opinion. It's probably goal of the weekend if it stands, and I think bar Brentford fans or anyone who's got a real dislike for Palace would like that goal to stand because it's genius what he does. But I think what happens is the referee is not looking at the kick. He's looking at what happens in the penalty area and he's assuming a cross is coming into the box. So when he sees the impact of the foul, which is questionable in itself, he just blows up because he doesn't think Eze's going to shoot from where he is. He thinks, well, the cross is coming in. I've seen an offence by Will Hughes. I'm just going to give Brentford the free kick. I don't think he's even aware that Eze's shot. I think he just thinks a cross is coming in. I've seen the foul. I know the ball is in flight. I'm going to blow. And it's really unfortunate because once that happens, you cannot give the goal.
Yeah, which was blown.
Do you remember the one that Lewis Dunk at West Brom in the COVID season? Lee Mason was on duty, and that was really, really weird because he basically let Dunk take an early free kick and then changed his mind as Dunk took the free kick. This wasn't like that. I just think it's really unlucky and unfortunate, and it's a young referee who'll learn from what's happened there and go, okay, give myself 2 more seconds, basically. Because although there is a foul by Hughes, certainly if VAR was, say he didn't give it, if VAR looked at it, VAR would go, well, that has got no impact on what's happened. So the goal would stand. So it's just unfortunate, I think. He'll give you some trouble on Saturday, Suj. No doubt.
Yeah, of course. He's a talented player. What can you do?
try your best to deal with him.
It's not like he's going to be. We know what we're getting with him. He's a talented player.
I think those who've bought him for FPL are in a much better position than they were in this time last week because I really do think he'll stay now, and I think that's good news for you if you own Eze. Defensively, repeat what I said. Watching the game and thinking Mitchell over Munoz here, is a real call based on what I'm watching, and literally Munoz assisted within that moment where I was still thinking about it. So some interesting build up with Anderson taking goal kicks but not taking goal kicks. Essentially, Henderson just touching it, and Anderson playing the ball forward. Henderson's ownership, I know, caused quite a bit of intrigue in the FPL community because it's really high amongst the sort of the engaged players and sort of content creators. I think, to be honest, just the same conclusion that I came to on the 4.5s was there's good alternatives like Areola and Flecken, as we've even seen from that game. I think, by the way, on a different day, Flecken gets bonus on perhaps the old BPS system. I don't know if that's true or not, but with 6 saves yesterday, he felt like maybe he should have. But I think on Flecken and Areola, it was like them opening fixtures are not good enough. And most people were wildcarding early. So the conclusion from the 4.5s was clearly Henderson. by such a long way. Once people, unless anyone was thinking longer term, so that's why I think the ownership has ended up really high. There's 3 of the next 4 at home, so I think whatever you're on Palace, you're quite happy with. Those who started with Mateta, if they did, guess there's every chance he'll now start at the weekend as well. Kamada, I thought, was quite quiet, and I think that falls in line with something Rory had said to our patrons after Eze played the last friendly, that it becomes more of an Eze show just because he's out there, and then Kamada doesn't take the initiative so much, and I think that showed up at the weekend as well.
Cool. Let's go to the final game, James. Chelsea 0, Manchester City 2. I mean, City had a lot of control, but Chelsea did creep up with chances. I mean, Cole Palmer, he just has a way of always looking threatening. He's I suppose Palmer versus Doku, where Palmer rarely is wasteful and always creates something, and Doku, on the other hand, I thought was really frustrating. All right game, I would say, in the end. And I think, but City did need that second goal, and after that second goal went in, then you kind of felt, right, okay, this is just going to be easy for them to see out now. And a great, well-taken goal. Just the way Kovacic ran through Caicedo and then just finished it was great.
Yeah, some key points from City tactically, firstly, which do have FPL impacts, I think. Obviously, Rico Lewis playing at right back is obviously going to have an impact on whatever the left back is doing, because clearly on occasion he's obviously going to move into midfield and get involved. So then the build, you obviously had Vardiel playing as basically the left-sided centre-back, nothing like what made him a super FPL asset last season. But that said, he was still just outside the bonus. I think at full time he was in it and he just dropped out afterwards, I think, Suj. That might change, but I think the bigger intrigue on it for me was what City did off the ball higher up the pitch. So they basically played a 4-1-4-1. And it might have been it was something specifically for Chelsea. But what they weren't keen to do was just let Chelsea build through Lavia and Caicedo. So you had De Bruyne and Bernardo, who played higher, do roles on Lavia and Caicedo. And Lavia, by the way, particularly played really well. But I think if they go down that route on a 4-1-4-1, it will facilitate Kevin De Bruyne playing within the team better this season. Because I've said to you several times, I think it's difficult to say someone that good is a problem, but I do think I watch City in certain games and think they can be quite easy to play through. That wasn't the case yesterday, and it was because City were quite aggressive high off the ball, and De Bruyne is almost like a half space left 10, having Bernardo to his right, who can definitely then funnel back in and drop in alongside Kovacic because he's an incredible player. Yeah. Makes the life a little bit easier for De Bruyne off the ball. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you'll also get better from him. Also, if you're going to have 2 speedsters in the wide areas, that makes De Bruyne's life a little bit better as well. But I think you might get back to a stage where he becomes second assister quite a lot more.
True.
Because he'll feed them and then they'll feed Haaland, basically.
The big caveat is Rodri comes back. So does Rodri come in straight for Kovacic, or does Kovacic sit alongside Rodri and Bernardo Silva?
Well, I think more the point is that they've done that yesterday. That system works really well for them with Rodri. They've done it without Rodri, because I think most of us thought going into the game, oh, shit, right, Rodri's not going to play. He'll play Bernardo really deep as a pivot with Rodri. And there was times it was like that, but particularly off the ball and higher, Bernardo went kind of alongside De Bruyne and pressed him. So the fact that they did that, I think that's really good for them mentally as well. They'll feel better about themselves, I think, winning a game like that against a strong opponent, whatever you think of Chelsea at the moment, without Rodri was a statement. Any people like me who've been sitting there going, I don't think they win it this year, I think they'll regress, would have looked at yesterday and gone, yeah. That's why most people still think City will win this league. That looks strong. And there's people to come back into that, like Rodri, Oscar Bob later in the window, Cole Walkers, Nathan Aki's, other people that they can bring into this, and they may well invest. Savinho and Doku was really interesting. Despite Sky's really poor attempts to give Pep Guardiola a microphone that he could speak from after the game, I think we did get an indication from what he was trying to do with, he wanted to try Savinho on the left. which is interesting because I made comments last week about what Pep said after the Community Shield, where he specifically said Savinho right. He said
Yep.
Doku left or right. He said specifically Savinho right, Grealish left only, basically. So when they were lining up pre-kickoff and they were all showing on the graphic Savinho on the left, I think Savinho's playing on the right here. Maybe you've not seen this player. I don't know. Sure enough, started on the left. It lasted 15 minutes. And for both he and Doku, it was so much better once they swapped back to what would have been their more familiar side. And Guardiola essentially said that he saw Doku on the right-hand side. And I think, do you know what it was? I think he just wanted to get Doku away from him. So I just do my head in.
Good
He didn't play badly, by the way, Doku, but I spoke about this a lot last season. He must drive Haaland nuts.
It's the end product.
He must do.
I was watching, I'm like, just play the ball at the right time, right weighting of the pass, get the cross in earlier. There was so many opportunities to add some end product, and City would have been comfortable in this game. But his final decision making, just a little bit hurried or poor execution. He frustrated the hell out of me, so I can't even imagine how Pep and Haaland feel with him.
I thought Savinho was really good in that first half, actually. It looked, you could definitely see what I'd seen when I looked at clips of him, that little kind of bit of Mahrez in him. Nice little bit of arrogance, very left-footed. The 26 brings the memories of that as well. I don't know if he might have picked up a problem or not, because obviously he came off at half-time. Maybe that was always the intention, to ease Phil Foden.
It was put down as an injury substitution.
Okay, fine. Let me ask you a question, Suj. So coming into this weekend now, obviously if I don't wildcard, I got no Haaland, I got no City players at all. If Kulusevski doesn't start tonight, and I don't think he starts on Saturday, he's a sell for me, right? Basically,
Yep.
That's obviously the one I'm selling under that circumstance. Do I buy Doku?
I don't know. My question to you is, what's Jack Grealish done to not be able to get into the team ahead of Doku?
But I don't think Doku played bad, Suj.
No, I don't either. This is the funny thing. He was
Doku played well.
Paced, carried the ball really well. His dribbling was good. It was just that end product was awful. I'm with you. I wouldn't sit here and say like it's just that frustration of the end piece, James.
I just think
you drop it down and find a way to buy Haaland.
No, I told you it's a -8. I'm not doing it. I'm not taking a -8 just to captain for one game week.
Triple captain in there.
No, same thing, mate. No, I'm taking 8 points off my total. Like, no, I'm just going to take it on, I think, can I? And just, I know what's happening. I just got to accept my fate, haven't I? I don't think buying Doku, because I know what it will be, right? If I post my team on Friday, or I'm on the deadline stream Saturday, and I haven't made any changes, how can you not have City this weekend? That's what it will be, right? I don't want any City attacker unless it's Haaland. That's my take right now, because I would have wanted Oscar Bob.
Obviously Foden, but you don't have the money for that.
Well, I could do. I could go Son to Foden. But am I even certain he's starting? And what have I just said about Everton? Unless Son gets injured tonight. If Son got injured tonight, of course, I'm going Son to Foden, aren't I, for 1 week. Even if I don't know if Foden's going to play, that would be an obvious. But I wouldn't be taking Son out ahead of this weekend. What, for a Foden who might not even start? No. I wonder that. I've thought about that with Doku more, and I'm like looking at alternatives for this weekend if I was to buy someone at that bracket. Obviously wouldn't be able to get to Eze. So not keen on massively Kamada. Do I look at Smith Rowe? I mean, we should have spoke about Adama Traore and his blistering pace, but yeah, it's the same thing with him and his. I think if I was going for 1 week this week and I sell Kulusevski, I'd be almost tempted to go Smith Rowe or Brereton Diaz rather than Doku, despite the fixture.
I wouldn't buy Doku because I think he'd frustrate the hell out of me.
But also, I can put him in for one game. I'll be at White Hart Lane, obviously, watching Tottenham, so I don't have to watch it. And I'll wildcard Saturday night, almost definitely. I realised I said that this week, kids. And I can just get rid of him straight away. So maybe that would be... I think
if there's ever a circumstance, that might be one that...
I think people would think that was bonkers if I didn't just buy Doku under that circumstance. Because what you would say is, if Savinho's gone off injured as well, surely he starts, right? Or could he just put Grealish and Foden in the two wide areas like he could, couldn't he?
He could. I wouldn't have confidence in it.
Anyway,
Tricky one. Let's talk
really
about
good opening
Chelsea.
day for City. I don't think it was a bad day for Chelsea either. I think they had a real period sort of in and around the first goal where they were struggling a little bit. I think it felt like, and I know Gary Neville said this on commentary as well, it felt like Maresca simplified the game because of the opponent and because pre-season hadn't gone well. But he did change things towards the second half for the last friendly against Inter Milan that suggested maybe that would happen as well. I thought Lavia played really well. Thought the two centre-backs in terms of their defensive work, Fofana and Colwell, did pretty well, actually. I don't think Gusto and Cucurella were particularly bad. Sanchez very much divides opinion. I think he should save Kovacic's shot, and some of his distribution was a little bit iffy, but Chelsea will insist on keep buying backup goalkeepers rather than a really good goalkeeper would be a really good decision for them to make. I didn't like Fernandes in the 10 role, but I understand it against an opponent like this. The concerning one from the FPL perspective is obviously Nkunku going off. And I think Nkunku particularly going off when Jackson has not had basically a full pre-season and stayed on longer, because you could have just put Nkunku in that role, right?
Yeah, and Neto's obviously only been with the club days, not weeks, and is straight onto the pitch as his replacement.
Well, Neto will obviously clearly get minutes, but I think Nkunku will play the Fernandes role in these forthcoming games, and Fernandes will drop into a deeper role. By the way, it definitely should not be Romeo Lavia coming out of that team based on what I saw yesterday. But you do look at that attack, you think now, what, Madueke not involved, Sterling not in the squad. I take it you've seen all that mess. But who wants to take Raheem Sterling's wages? There's no one in this country who's going to want to take them wages. It'd be more likely that clubs would be more interested in taking Madueke off Chelsea, for example. I think
they just bought him, James.
Nkunku owners, Nkunku's the one I've been saying he's not the one that I wanted to chase. I.e., if I don't start with him, shit, have I got to chase that price because he scored against City? Now, clearly, that's not the case. And actually, it looks worse now than possibly any of us imagined it might have been, because he's not even made it to 60 minutes and yet had a more consistent pre-season than others. But I do think the opponent is a big impact on this. And I think Nkunku will probably play the majority of the games going forward behind Jackson or an other if they buy a different forward. So chill. Plus, I don't think there's that other many 6.5s that really put their hand up to go, pick me, pick me. I mean, we've spoken about
Minter, but I think Minter, obviously we don't know about concussion.
I mean, one that would be a consideration for me rather than Doku this week would maybe even be Matoma at that price. But the reality is, Suj, if Kulusevski comes through tonight, all right, I think he's going to play. I'm just staying with Kulusevski.
Stay with it. Makes sense.
And therefore, if I make that decision, I ain't selling Porro, Son, or Solanke going into this weekend if I'm happy with them. So I'm not doing anything, am I? And if I'm sitting there with like Bumo as like first sub and stuff, even if I get an injury, yeah. See you next week, kids.
Indeed. Well, you get away with not talking about Spurs. I've just been through some of the questions that we've had in on X, and we've talked about them. It's really Quansah, stick or twist, and Nkunku, stick or twist. And we'll know more tomorrow, depending on obviously how the Spurs boys come through tonight and what the score is in that.
I mean, if we actually said for anyone, get rid, we've made, even with Barco, we've said stay, Quansah, stay. With all of them at the moment, I feel like we said stay. Is that right?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think there's anyone that spooked me that I definitely want to move off. It's 1 week. It's 1 week. And players that, Nkunku, well, he had City. So is it fair to make that kind of decision?
Yeah, you started with him for the toughest game and now you're going to sell him.
No,
Wait,
doesn't make sense. Yeah. Exactly that. James, you are going to Leicester today to watch the Spurs. So tell us what we've got to look forward to for the rest of the week, and then you can enjoy yourself on the train all the way up to East Midlands.
I shall do so. People's Poll podcast is out voting till about roughly 4 o'clock. Free options for you. It's kind of a little bit of a continuation. I think it is relevant to FPL, although not stated as FPL. Two of the free options at least. So the idea of discussing a key player that each Premier League club can ill afford to lose to injury. Also, you could vote for a position that each Premier League club we think needs to strengthen before the window closes, or you can vote for us to discuss the changing of the laws. Some of the instances at the weekend, I think, got like an acceptance from people on some of these changes. For example, there was a Kovacic handball yesterday in a Chelsea City game, which I'm delighted wasn't given, but I think it probably gets given last year. And everyone's accepted it largely. I think that's good, by the way. So maybe even some positive changes. Wednesday, me and Clates will be doing the Clayton and James show, and I think we'll probably certainly at least have a chat about Leicester on there, if not Leicester and Tottenham. There'll be some other bits. Clayton will come up with a schedule for that. Thursday clash of correspondence is Wolves versus Chelsea, so some more on Nkunku with Bradley Parker and Gary Mansell. Ask James on Friday, scheduled for 12 p.m. UK time with an audio to follow afterwards. If you want to support the show, it's patreon.com/Planet FPL. Suj and Clayton are rocking out the Q&A for the advanced and intermediate podcast today. Tomorrow I've got a quiz on weekend debutants. Wednesday, Tottenham Arse, where I'll be going into the detail of Tottenham's trip to Leicester this evening. Money in football, Suj, on Thursday on Bordeaux. Bang, no longer a professional football club. Was in the Champions League 10 years ago. And Friday we'll have our Game Week 2 preview podcast. There's also additional video content at Advanced tier as well, which kicks off with Nico's Corner today, and also features the new Wednesday vid that I'm going to do, FPL Midweek Dilemmas. There'll be away days tomorrow. Friday be the team news stream, and on Thursday I'm going to look at, on Talking Tactics, how Southampton managed to gain an element of control against Newcastle before Newcastle were reduced to 10 men.
Good. James, that was a great show and looking forward to all the content. I'm going to cover off some of the questions that we maybe didn't discuss on the Q&A with Clayton if we get time to today as well. But other than that, have a safe journey up. Good luck tonight, because I need at least Solanke and Porro to do well. Kulusevski and Son couldn't get injured in the first 15 minutes, not bothered. But other than that, listeners, thank you for tuning in. I hope your weekend has been fruitful. Stay safe, look after yourselves. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone. Be nice to each other and play it your way. Cue music, please, man child.